Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Phantom ball python, and I'd have to say the Phantom's probably one of the most underrated ball python morphs I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, it works like a dark morph, similar to black pastel or cinnamon or GHI. If you mix it with other genes, you get a really dark black background, which is really impressive. It's also part of the blue-eyed leucistic complex, although it doesn't always produce an all-white snake with blue eyes. Usually if you think about a blue-eyed leucistic, you're thinking about like an all-white snake with blue eyes, and in this case I'd say that's kind of the exception. You mix it with other genes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex and you get some really impressive looking snakes like you really can't make with any other gene. So today I want to jump over to the internet and I want to show you the awesome potential of the Phantom ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to show you this snake right here. This is a Phantom, and if you're familiar with ball pythons, you probably recognize another morph that is extremely similar to the Phantom, and that is the Mohave. I would say the Mohave has almost exactly the same pattern as the Phantom. There are some differences. As a matter of fact, if you put them side by side, you can actually pick them out. The Phantom actually has a little bit more brighter yellow as far as the color on top of the snake, and it also has a darker background. In the Mohave, it's not as dark, is really almost like a jet black in a lot of cases on these Phantoms. And the other thing is if you actually compare them to a normal ball python, a lot of times the normals will have like the Roswell gray alien heads on the sides of the snake. Essentially what happens is with the Mohave and the Phantom, those alien heads kind of get turned into like keyholes. They almost look like you could put a key right in a lock in this. That's kind of what they call them, the keyholes. It's kind of characteristic of the Mohave and the Phantom. So what I want to do is I want to show you what the Super Phantom looks like. Take a look at this. This is a Super Phantom, and it's kind of interesting because it's actually in the blue-eyed leucistic. Most snakes in the blue-eyed leucistic actually form an all-white snake with blue eyes in the Super form. This actually has two copies of the Phantom gene, and it's kind of interesting. It looks completely different than anything. I'd say it's kind of a unique anomaly, the Phantom as a Super in the blue-eyed leucistic. So here is the Mohave. If you're wondering what the Mohave looks like, if you look at this, it almost looks like a Phantom, but you can see the color in here is not as dark as the Phantom. You can see the color up on top is not really as bright yellow as the Phantom. And this is what happens if you actually take a Mohave and you cross it with a Phantom, and you get a Mohave Phantom. It's also known as a purple passion. Probably one of my favorite snakes that I've ever seen. Purple passion has this really kind of a purpley creamy color. I've actually seen people on YouTube pick up and handle these snakes. Even as adults, they look exactly like this. They're really awesome. They almost don't even look real, like they're made of plastic or something. Really kind of a weird appearance to the purple passion. If you actually compare this to the Super Phantom, take a look at this. So the Super Phantom looks similar to the Phantom Mohave, but it doesn't really have the purple color that you see in the purple passion. The other thing that's really cool about this is this combination between the Phantom and the Mohave is actually an allelic combination. So if you breed it to something else, half the offspring are Mohave, half the offspring are Phantom, and you get no normals, which is pretty powerful as a breeder. So here is Bamboo. Bamboo is also in the blue-eyed leucistic. As a matter of fact, this snake right here, this is Bobby over here on Morphmarket. This is from the ad over from Morphmarket when I was actually buying into the Bamboo project. This is where I bought them. And if you actually mix Phantom with the Bamboo, take a look at this. This is really interesting because you get an almost white snake with blue eyes. As a matter of fact, if you make a Super Bamboo with two copies of the Bamboo, it's a bright white snake with bright blue eyes. And then you add in the Phantom, which is kind of sort of in the blue-eyed leucistic. It's actually considered in the blue-eyed leucistic, but it doesn't really make the really bright white snakes. As a matter of fact, if you look at this one, you can almost see some patterns coming through the snake, and you can see a little bit of color on the tail and a little bit of color on the head. So I'd say it's kind of an exception when it comes to the blue-eyed leucistic. Here is the lesser. The lesser is also in the blue-eyed leucistic. It's a really powerful breeder. And if you're looking for probably the purest white snake with blue eyes, probably the best combination would be lesser mohave. Makes some really bright white snakes. And this is what happens when you mix lesser with the phantom. Take a look at this. It's almost a white snake with blue eyes. You can see in this case, it has really almost like a bright blue eye, but it doesn't really have all the really stark white color on the snake. As a matter of fact, if you kind of back up to this picture, you can see there's a little bit of pattern right down the top. It's almost like the phantom is such a dominant mutation when it comes to mixing it with other genes that it actually even breaks through the blue-eyed leucistic, and you can actually see it in effect. Here is a pastel. Pastel is pretty much the bread and butter of the ball python industry. Pastel is really inexpensive, works really well with a lot of different morphs. And essentially what the pastel does is it makes for a yellow snake, brings out a lot of the yellow, really reduces the pattern. Look what happens when you mix pastel with phantom. Take a look at this. This is probably one of my favorite combos. Essentially what it does is it takes the pastel and it gives it really like a really high contrast and brings a really dark background in the snake. It almost seems like it brings flames up the sides and kind of outlines the little spots on the sides with black. Makes for a really impressive combo. Here is a spider ball python, and I would say usually when it comes to the spider is really visually dominant. You mix other genes in with the spider and you can almost always see a really strong influence from the spider. And here's what happens if you take spider and mix it with a phantom. This is a really interesting combo. And when I first saw this one, the first thing that comes to mind is the blackhead spider. Almost has, almost completely wipes out the spider pattern, kind of almost tones it down and brings it back to a normal pattern of a snake. And the interesting thing about blackhead is when you mix it with spider, the spider actually has some neurological issues in some cases. Some people actually kind of shy away from spiders because of the head wobble and the stargazing. And people have said if you actually take blackhead, mix it with spider, it completely eliminates any of the head wobble in the spider. And so, I was kind of thinking the same thing with this. This almost looks like a blackhead spider. So I was kind of interested. I haven't seen any data on this, but I'm wondering if the phantom spider would actually completely eliminate the head wobble. It's kind of an interesting project. Here's another one. This is the banana / coral glow. It's actually a co-dominant mutation, and it's the banana and coral glow are essentially two different lines of the same snake, and it's a co-dominant. So if you actually took a banana or coral glow and you bred it to something else, half the offspring come out banana or coral glow. Take a look at what happens when you mix banana with the phantom. Take a look at this. It really brings in a lot of the dark color. You can definitely tell. You can kind of see a pattern here. Everything we mix it with, it really darkens the background color of the snake. You can definitely tell it has a really strong influence as a darkening morph. Here's another one. This is actually a combination, and essentially what I did is I found a really impressive phantom combo over on the internet, and I stripped off the phantom and just left the pastel and the yellow belly. And a lot of times if you mix pastel and yellow belly together, essentially what it does is it brings out the really bright yellow, intense color in any snake. And I would say it works almost really well with any snake, especially if you mix pastel and yellow belly and fire in any other combos. Essentially what it does, it really cleans up the snake and brings out a really bright yellow. This is what happens when you mix phantom with the pastel yellow belly. Take a look at this snake. This is a really awesome snake. As far as a dark morph, I'd say this is probably one of the most impressive dark morphs I've seen. Really gives a really dark black background, and it really, the yellow belly and the pastel really bring out this really bright yellow. Really impressive combo. So this is the last one I want to show you over here on the internet. This is actually the GHI. The GHI is also a really dark morph, and GHI is short for gotta have it. Gotta have it. It's a really awesome morph, and essentially what the GHI does is it darkens the snake, and it also kind of acts like leopard, where leopard really scrambles up the pattern on the snake. The leopard is kind of different than the GHI, where it doesn't really darken the snake. The GHI kind of does both. It darkens it and jumbles up the pattern. Here's what happens when you mix GHI with Phantom. Take a look at this snake. I thought this was especially interesting because usually with GHI combos, you get a really crazy pattern, and the Phantom almost seems like it really calms down the pattern, makes for this repeating pattern. You can almost see the keyholes in the Phantom, really darkens it and really has this really bright yellow down the top of the snake. It's pretty awesome combo. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Orion Jones asks, when I'm working with the ball python genetic calculator, is it better to have more possible outcomes for offspring? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, I used to sit there and play on Morphmarket and use the genetic calculator for hours on end. And there's different ways you can actually go about it. As a matter of fact, some people kind of go after the number of different possibilities. Some people actually do that. And a lot of times it's really helpful, especially if you go into the reptile show and you have a whole table full of all these different combos. You're selling all the different hatchlings. So for example, if you actually bred a 3-gene animal with a 3-gene animal, you can end up with anything all the way up to 6 genes. You have a whole rainbow of different snakes coming out of that combination. And the other interesting thing is some people, instead of the number of combinations, what they'll actually do is they'll go for the prettiest snakes. A lot of people go for example, some people really like bright snakes, like with the pastel, the yellow belly, the orange dream, some of those really bright and really colorful snakes. Some people go for the dark morphs. They're going for like the GHI and the cinnamon and the Phantom, going for the dark morphs. Some people kind of mix it up, and it really depends on what you're going for. As a matter of fact, some people actually go after the money. Sometimes you can actually sit there and figure out all the prices for all the combinations and breed snakes together that bring in more money. I'd say there's a lot of different ways you can actually approach it. Some people kind of have this balancing act. You want to make some good money, you want to make some really pretty snakes, and you want to have a lot of variety. And some people actually do very well. I've actually seen some people at the reptile shows, and they'll have a whole table of nothing but pies, just regular base pies. I've actually seen that, and they're selling them for a few $100 a piece, but they have a whole table full, and they're just selling them left and right because everybody can jump into the project. They're all reasonably priced, not really high pied combos, and they just stick with a base pied mutation. There's a lot of different ways you can actually structure your breeding projects. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.